U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says Iran's nuclear program has been devastated after the U.S. attacks on its facilities, echoing President Trump's comments overnight. Hegseth said it was a targeted mission and not open-ended and not directed at the Iranian people. Let's listen now to more of his remarks.
This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it.
We can now bring back in International Affairs Editor Kethevane Gorjestani. Welcome back to the set. So we've been digesting some of the Secretary of Defense's comments there. He's given a little bit more detail about that attack that was carried out. Can you walk us through what went on?
Well, look, he gave quite a few details, him and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, especially about what actually happened in the operation. And so we learned that there were some of those B-2 bombers who were used as decoys, who were sent to go east and fly, to go west and fly to Guam, while the actual B-2 bombers that were going to be used to target the Iranian nuclear sites went undetected. 7 of them, meaning 2 bombs per each aircraft. That means 14 of those 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs were dropped on Iran's nuclear site. And the overall operation from the time they crossed over in Iran to the time they left was around 25 minutes. So a very precise and quick operation there. What was interesting, and we heard some of it in that soundbite that we just played, was how Pete Hegseth qualified this operation, saying that it was an incredible and overwhelming success that had devastated the Iranian nuclear program. Now, that is the assessment of the Americans, but that's a very broad and vague assessment. Clearly, it seems that the Americans caused quite a lot of damage to Iran's nuclear sites, but how much that has actually destroyed the nuclear program is still very much unknown. And that's really where the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, was going when he said, answering a question about the battle damage assessment, saying that it was still too early and that the assessment was still ongoing. So even the Americans don't know exactly what they managed to destroy, what exactly they hit, but clearly there has been at least some form of damage to the Iranian facilities. But overall, the messaging of the Americans is that we planned this very well. It was a very precise operation. And by all accounts, it has been a successful one.
Yes. And to follow up on that, the president now said, we're ready for negotiations. Now, Iran, however, not really signaling they're ready for negotiations. So where does that leave us in the wake of this?
Well, that is what the Americans are trying to telegraph publicly and probably privately to the Iranians. And we heard Pete Hegseth talking about that, saying, look, this was not the idea was to have a focused mission. It was not an open-ended mission. The scope was intentionally limited, he said. They struck nuclear sites. He insisted that they didn't strike Iranian citizens, that they didn't strike civilian infrastructure. And so they are trying to say, look, look, this is a one and done. We went in, we hit it, and we went out. They don't really get to decide whether it's one and done. And from the messaging of the Iranians, clearly the Iranians are saying there will be consequences. We heard the foreign minister of Iran saying that Iran would have really basically no choice but to retaliate. And this statement by the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, said the number, spread, size of the U.S. military bases in the region are not a strength, but rather a point of vulnerability, saying that the United States did not have the ability to escape the consequences of a severe response. And if we can pull up a map of a U.S. military presence in the broader Middle East regions, you're going to see that there are quite a few U.S. troops in the area. The red dots are the actual physical U.S. military bases. Those are countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, but there are also heavy U.S. military presence beyond actually having a base, and that includes Oman, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, for example, where there are several hundred troops that are present there. And so for the Iranians, if they want to retaliate, they don't need to attack mainland United States. There are U.S. interests in the region that the Iranians can target themselves because, yes, there have been a lot of destruction, especially from Israeli strikes, of the sort of ballistic weaponry of the Iranians. But the Iranians also still have some weapons, and they have the proxies in the region. Yes, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza have been severely weakened, but there are still very strong militias in Iraq, and there are also the Houthis in Yemen who, for the past few weeks, had been in a sort of uneasy truce with the Americans, but they could also strike. And so what you're seeing is that if and when the Iranians decide to respond, they have multiple options to respond. And we heard also from the Americans, if you respond, we will respond. That is exactly what some on the far right of the MAGA wing, who are isolationists, were saying, is that there is no one and done when it comes to striking Iran, because you are going to get pulled in to a longer, protracted war, possibly in the Middle East, because there will be tit-for-tat retaliation, and no one knows where that goes and how that ends.
Right, so we can expect this to continue for a bit longer. Kethevane, thank you so much for joining us. That's France 24's International Affairs editor, Kethevane Gorjestani.